Okay, this morning, Parashat Miketz, Shishi and Shvi, we're going to do to the end of the Parsha. Everybody mute yourselves, please. Okay, we're ready to begin. I'm going to show you that Rav Soloveitchik has a totally different reading of these aliyot, Shishi, and to the end of the Parsha and Miketz, because he sees Yosef motivated. Everybody does. I shouldn't say only Rabbi Soloveitchik, in the sense that Yosef wants to see his halamot, his two dreams, come to fruition. But he reads the psukim fascinating. In many ways, he reads between the lines and he sees what's not written there. And he demonstrates what Yosef is thinking by the Torah not telling us certain things and the Torah changing wording. Well, we're going to see that in a few minutes. So let's take a look at the text so we all understand the Parsha itself. Page 242 in the ArtScroll, Parshas Miketz, Shishi. So it's Perek Mem Gimel, Pasuk Tezayin. Vayar Yosef Tamis Binyamin, Vayomer La Asher Al Beito, Haveyas HaAnashim HaBeita, U'Tvoach Tevach V'Ochen Ki Iti Yochlu HaAnashim Batzorayim. Now Yosef saw Binyamin with them. Remember, this is the first time in 21 years that he's seen his youngest brother. And the only brother that he's a full brother to. Remember, all the other brothers are really half brothers. Binyamin is his real brother from the same father and the same mother. So now Yosef saw Binyamin with them. So he said to one in charge of his house, bring the men into the house, have a meat slaughtered and prepare it, for with me will these men dine at noon. So he's inviting everybody to his palace, right? So the man did as Yosef said, and the man brought the men to Yosef's house. He brings the brothers to Yosef's house. Now the brothers are talking to themselves, among themselves. But the men became frightened when they were brought to Yosef's house. And they said, because of the money we placed in our sacks originally, are we being brought here? So that a charge can be fabricated against us, that is crashed, and that it crashed down on us, and that we've taken as slaves along with our donkeys. Vayigishu pasuk yutes. Vayigishu ala ish asher al beiso Yosef vayidabrei lov pesach habayis. They approached the man who was in charge of Yosef's house and spoke to him at the entrance of the house. Vayomru bi adoni yorod yoranu batchilo lishpor ochel. And they said, if you please, my lord, we have indeed come down originally to buy food. Pasuk Chav Vayikivanu el hamalon vaniftecho et amtechosenu v'nei kesef ish b'pi amtechota am takto kaspenu b'mishkolo v'noshev aso biyadenu. But it happened when we arrived in the inn and opened our sacks that behold, one's money was in the mouth of his sack. It was our own money in its full amount. So we brought it back in our hand. We're returning the money that was left in our sacks. The kesef acher horadnu b'yadenu lishpor ochel lo yadanu misham kaspenu b'amtechosenu. And they said, we have also brought other money down in our hand to buy food. The money that we found was that money that was for the original. Now we brought more money. We do not know who put our money in our sacks. Vayomer, and the man's response, Shalom lachem, al tiro Elohechem, velohei avichem, nasan lachem matmon ba'am tchosechem, kaspechem bo Eloi, vayotzei aleim es Shimon. He replied, peace be with you, fear not. Your God and the God of your father has put a hidden treasure in your sacks. Your payment had reached me, and he brought Shimon out to them. Remember, Shimon was taken captive by Yosef. He was the one that was left. While they went back to Yaakov, Shimon was still in Egypt as a captive. Pasuk Chav Daled. Vayaveo ishas hanashim beiso Yosef vayitem mayim vayichatzu ragleim vayitem mispo lachamorehem. And Pasuk 24. Then the man brought the men into Yosef's house. The men, meaning the brothers. He provided water, and they washed their feet, and he gave feed to their donkeys. Vayachinu es hamincha ad bo Yosef batzarayim kishamu kisham yochlu lachem. They prepared the tribute for when Yosef would come at noon. Remember, they're waiting for Yosef to arrive, right? They're going to have lunch at noon, for they had heard that they were to eat a meal there. Vayavo Yosef habaisa. So now Yosef returns to the house. Vayavihu lo es hamincha asher biyadam habaisa vayishtachavu lo arza. And when Yosef came to the house, they brought the tribute that was in their hands to him in the house, and they prostrated themselves to him toward the ground. And so now Yosef begins the conversation. He inquired after their welfare, and he said, "Is your aged father of whom you spoke at peace? Is he okay? Is your father okay? Is he still alive?" And they replied, "Your servant, our father, is at peace. He still lives." And they bowed and they prostrated themselves. Then he lifted up his eyes and he saw his brother, Binyamin, his mother's son. So he said, "Is this your little brother of whom you spoke to me?" And he said, "God be gracious to you, my son." Wow, this is the one that you've talked about. And then Yosef rushed because his compassion for his brother had been stirred, and he wanted to weep. So he went into the room and wept there. In other words, he exits right after this conversation. He becomes very emotional. He sees Binyamin and he runs out. He washes his face and then he goes out. And he washes his face and went out and he fortified himself and he said, "Serve food." So now they're going to have their dinner. And they served him separately and them separately, and the Egyptians who ate with him didn't eat with them as well, for the Egyptians could not bear to eat food with the Hebrews, it being loathsome to the Egyptians. Pasuk 33, Lamed Gimel. And they were seated before him, and the firstborn, according to how did they set up, who sat where? So the Torah says that Yosef arranged according to their age. Seniority was closest to him, and the youngest was further away from him. And the men looked at one another in astonishment. Why? How did he know who's older and who's not? They were shocked. Right? Simple. And he had portions that had been set before for them to be served, and Binyamin's portion was 5 times as much as the portion for any of them. He gave Binyamin special treatment, and they drank and they became intoxicated with him. And then he instructed the one in charge of his house, saying, "Fill the men's sacks with much food as they can carry, and put each man's money in the mouth of his sack." Here we go again, right? They're going to get the money returned. That's going to shock them even more. But he then adds, right, that and he says, "And my goblet, the silver goblet, you know what I want you to do with that? Place it in the mouth of the youngest one's sack, along with the money of his purchase." And the man followed exactly what this instruction was from Yosef. And the day dawned, and the men were sent off, they and their donkeys. Pasuk Dalet. Hem yatsu esa'ir lo hirchiku v'Yosef amar asher al beiso kum redof achari anashim v'saktam v'amarta aleim lama shilamtem ra tachas tova. And he says, okay, now he comes up with this wonderful plan. And they had left the city and had not gone far when Yosef said to the one in charge of his house, "Get up, chase after the men and when you overtake them, you are to say to them, why do you repay evil for good? Why did you act so miserably to me? I give you everything, and you steal my cup." That's what he's going to say. Pasuk 5, right? He says, "Is this not the one from which my master drinks, with which he regularly divines, you have done evil. And how you acted, you stole his most important cup. He caught up to them, and that's exactly what he said. And they responded, what are you talking about? How could you accuse us, right? We came down with the money, he says. We found the money in our bags. We brought it back down. Now you're accusing us of stealing more money? This doesn't make sense. Pasuk 9, anyone among your servants with whom it is found shall die, and we also will become slaves to my Lord. In other words, go search. None of us stole the boss's, the king, the viceroy's cup. That, and we will also become slaves. And he replied, what you say now is also correct. The one with whom it is found shall be my slave, but the rest you shall be exonerated. I'm not following what you're suggesting. You're suggesting all of you become slaves. Oh no, I'm not doing that. And each one hurriedly lowered their sacks, and they opened each sack, right? And so now they open all of the bags, and what happens? And they find the cup in Binyamin's sack. They tear kriya. They rent their garments. Each one reloaded his donkey, and they return now to the city. Yehuda arrived with his brothers to Yosef's house. 1 second, let me bear with me another half a second. Whoops. Okay, when Yehuda arrived with his brothers to Yosef's house, he was still there. They fell to the ground before him. And Yosef said to them, what is this deed that you have done? Do you not realize that a man like me practices divination? He says, you took my cup that I use for divination. Now Yehuda speaks. What can we say to my Lord? How can we speak? How can we justify ourselves? God has uncovered the sin of your servants. Here we are ready to be slaves to my Lord, both we and the one in whose hand the goblet was found. Now Yosef answers, he says, oh no, I'm not going to do what you suggested. I'm only going to keep Binyamin as a slave. The rest of you can go home to peace to your father. End of the story. Now let's take a look at how Rav Soloveitchik analyzes these psukim. So you have the story in front of you. It's a lot of psukim, but the Rav focuses on the highlights because he develops a whole theory. What is the theory? The theory is that Yosef had planned by having Binyamin come down to Egypt that Yaakov would come with him. He never believed in a minute that Yaakov would ever allow Binyamin to descend to Egypt and be out of his eyesight without being there with him. He thought that Yaakov was going to come with Binyamin. That was his plan. Why does he want that so badly, that Yaakov will come to Mitzrayim? So when he's asking the brothers, I will not see you until you bring Binyamin, it wasn't so much Binyamin, according to the Rav, that Yosef was interested in. Yosef had a plan, and what was the plan? The plan was that Yaakov would come with him. Why is it so important to Yosef, that Yaakov come with him? Because that's correct. Until Yaakov will bow to him, the second dream will not come to its full fruition. And that's exactly what is suggesting here. The Rav suggests that we're being told these words, and we can see it all in what's missing in the story. He thought, like I said, that Yaakov would come with Binyamin. What he was shocked was when he sees Binyamin and there's no Yaakov with him. Because, of course, why would he think that Yaakov would come with Binyamin? Remember, Binyamin is the last of the children of his beloved Rachel, right? And he wasn't going to let Binyamin out of his eyesight, let alone travel down to Egypt. That was unbelievable. When he sees Binyamin and no Yaakov, Yosef therefore took the time. Now we understand. Remember the story, we just read it. The text tells us what happens. He tells his head honcho, he says, bring them into the palace and they'll wait for dinner. They'll wait for lunch, right? We're going to eat at noon. So let's say this was early in the morning when all of this happened, and they're waiting. Why are they waiting? So Rav Soloveitchik says, because as soon as, please, would everyone mute? There's some noise coming on. Okay, everybody should be muted. Okay?
I think there is a way for you to mute everybody.
I could, but I don't want to start doing. Okay, so just mute yourself, so it will not be any problem. And when Yosef sees that Yaakov is not present, he pauses. And what does he have to do? He disappears. Why does he have to disappear? He has to recalibrate his strategy now. His strategy is not working, right? He thought Yaakov would be there with Binyamin. Yaakov is not there. So now what does Yosef have to do? Now we understand why Yosef doesn't come right away to eat with them. And he makes them wait because he's doing one thing and one thing only. What is it? Now recalibrating his whole strategy, because Yosef has, according to Rav Soloveitchik, based on the Rishonim, Yosef has one goal, and that is that Yaakov will come down and Yaakov will bow. Why is that so crucial? Not only that the chalamot will come to fruition. What is the second chalom? What does it make? Yosef, the melech. If Yaakov bows, Yosef becomes the melech, and he becomes the the line for Melech HaMashiach. And that can never happen. Yosef cannot become melech. Yaakov does not come down because Yaakov is not going to bow to Yosef. Yaakov knows that Yehuda is going to be the melech, and Yehuda, Mashiach, is going to come from the line of Yehuda, not from Yosef. He can plan from here to tomorrow, Yosef, but he wasn't going to get Yaakov to bow to him. Two things weren't going to work out as Yosef thought they would. Number one, Yaakov would come down with Binyamin. Yaakov doesn't come down with Binyamin. And number two, Yosef would be able to disguise himself until Yaakov arrives. And that doesn't happen either, right? We're going to know that in next week's Parsha. In Vayigash, suddenly he bursts open and he can't hold it back anymore. And he tells them, and that's before Yaakov even arrives at the gate of Egypt. So two things don't happen according to his plan. Plan one was to get Yaakov to come down with Binyamin. That's Yosef's plan. It does not happen. It does not happen. So what happens? Binyamin comes down without Yosef. Yaakov never bows to Yosef, and Yosef never comes the Melech and the line for Melech HaMashiach. That simply does not come to fruition. Now take a look. Jump to Pasuk Chof Zayin. Something fascinating happens in this parsha. Vayishal lahem l'shalom. So now, okay, so he has them set up to eat with him. He steps out because now the Rav says, what's he doing in privately? He's recalibrating his whole plan since it didn't work out. Yaakov didn't show. So now take a look at Pasuk Zayin. Vayishal lahem l'shalom. So now he meets them and they're going to have lunch, right? They're going to have dinner in his palace. Excuse me. Vayishal lahem l'shalom. He now begins the conversation with them. Food is going to begin, but he's gracious and he begins. The viceroy looks at all of them sitting around And he says, Vayishal lohem lishalom. Vayomer hashalom avichem azokein asher amartem. He asked each one, how are you? And then he asks about whom? About their father. What does he call their father? What does the pasuk say in pasuk Kov Zayin? Vayomer hashalom avichem hazokein. Is that old man still alive? It's not like we call, a father the old guy. No, that's not what it means here. Hazokein asher amartem haodenu choy, is your father who you call old, is he still alive? The Rav points out something unusual is happening in this pasuk. Of the Avos, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, who lives the shortest period of time? Yaakov. How long does Avraham live? How old is Avraham when he dies? 175. How old is Yitzchak when he dies? 180. How old is Yaakov when he dies? 147. He's the youngest of all of them, and the Torah calls him the Zokein, the old one. The old one. Not only that, Chazal give an appellation to Yaakov that they don't give to Avram and to Yitzchak, and they call him Yisrael Saba, Yisrael the old one, Yisrael the grandfather, Yisrael Saba. Why would it be that the one who lives, this is what bothers Rav Soloveitchik, the one who lives the shortest of the Avos is given the appellation of Zokein? And the Rav says that this fact explains another oddity, actually. The Rav wonders, why in the world are we called Bnei Yisrael? We should have been called Bnei Avram. With all right and due, it was due to Avram that we created our people. Avram is the founder of the people. We should have been called Bnei Avram, not Bnei Yisrael. Yaakov is the only one in the Torah, he answers, the Rav says, who has direct communication with his grandchildren. Right? Who does he have that when we're told that? Who does he speak to? Ephraim and Menashe. Yaakov, do we have any documentation in the Torah that Avram talks to grandchildren? Not at all. That Yitzchak talks to grandchildren? Not at all. They talk to children clearly, but not to grandchildren. The only one of the Avos, the Rav says, who's having a communication line with his grandchildren is Yaakov. Through him, the Masorah has a clear future. It's through Yaakov the Masorah has a clear future. And that's why Rav Soloveitchik says the Torah calls Yaakov, not Avram and not Yitzchak, the Zokein. This appellation does not refer to the years a person lives. It's not the chronology of how many years. It's true, Avram lived considerably longer, Yitzchak even the most, Yaakov the least. It identifies Yaakov as the one who, as the Rav says, has the longest memory. He has the longest memory. He figured out the secret in perpetuating the Masorah from one generation to another. That's Yaakov. Yaakov is called Zokein, not Avram and not Yitzchak, because Yaakov is the one who creates a conversation with grandchildren. And he's the one who perpetuates the Masorah. He figures out the secret, how to communicate to grandchildren. And that's a special art. And that's what Zokein really means. Now jump to Pasuk Lamed Beis. So now, in Lamed Beis, Vayosimu lo levado, v'lehem levadam, v'lamitzrim ochlim ito levadam, ki lo yachlu hamitzrim le'achol es ha'ivrim lechem, ki to'eva hi lemitzrayim. Whoa, this pasuk should resonate with us today more than any, after what happened this past Sunday in Australia, in Sydney, Australia. May all of those who passed away become a Melitz Yosher for Klal Yisrael. But this pasuk resonates clearly with us. So who's eating with whom and who's not eating with whom in this pasuk? Well, the Mitzrim are not willing to eat with whom? Yosef. Yosef, at the end of the day, the Mitzrim are not willing to socialize with Yosef. And the Torah tells us why. Kito Eva Hila Mitzrayim. Foreigners are disgusted in the eyes of the Egyptians. Now, let's understand this. The Egyptians, did they need Yosef? They desperately, excuse me, I apologize. Even though the Egyptians needed Yosef terribly, they need, no, I have just a bad cold. Egyptians needed Yosef for his talent and his vision. They still could never accept, even though they needed him, they still could never accept him as a member of their society. Why? Because he was a Jew, he was a foreigner. This is the example of anti-Semitism from our earliest history. There we have it. We can't deny it. Here it is in the Torah. Yosef is mistreated, is shunned because he's different. He's different. It doesn't matter how much he gave them, and he gave them everything. He saved the entire economy, the entire society of the Egyptians, and they needed him desperately as a leader, as a visionary, and yet they don't have any tolerance to accept him among themselves, and they're not willing to eat. And the Torah uses to'eva. To'eva is they're disgusted with him. Yosef experienced this loneliness because Egyptians could never accept a foreigner as a true citizen. They just wouldn't accept it. We see this illness to this very day, don't we? The Jews can give the world so many wonderful discoveries. Everyone benefits from the startup nation, right? Everyone benefits. And yet, what do we see? The outlandish hatred towards us. We are always the one who they will not eat with, if you will, for we are different. And they always let us know how different we are. If you listen to the anti-Semitism that's raging, you'll listen to they're different. They're different. That's constantly there. The Jews can't be among us because they're different, they're different, they're different. Here you have it in the Torah, the first documentation of true anti-Semitism right here. And for whom? For Yosef, that they should have felt totally connected to, because Yosef saved literally their country. But no, they have no interest in Yosef at all. Now jump to then page 246, continuing on in the story. So remember, Yosef sits with them. He has dinner with them. They drink. We're told they drink, they eat. Everything's fine. Now let's see what happens on the next morning. Pasuk 240, page 246, Pasuk Gimel. Haboker or. The sun rises. It's the next day. Va'anashim shulchu hema v'chamoreihem. What does that mean? And the men were sent, right? And their donkeys. What happened here? The Boker, suddenly Rab Soloveitchik says, read it very carefully. The next morning, what are they called? Anashim. What would have you expected them to be called? Achim. That's right. His brothers. No, they're not called any longer Achim. They're called Anashim. And the Rav focuses on this. After the whole meal, they go late at night, everybody goes back to their rooms. And the next morning, Yosef wakes up and read the pasuk again. Haboker or, a new day. No longer are there his brothers. V'ha'anashim shulchu. What's shulchu? Shulchu is like, get out of here. Go. What causes this change? There was a rude awakening for Yosef, and this pasuk alludes to it. During the night, they were reunited as brothers, right? They were able to drink with each other. They were brothers that hadn't seen each other for 21 years. It's true. 11 of them didn't know that it was Yosef. That is true, right? But Yosef knew who they were. In the morning, that feeling of alienation, however, returns to Yosef. Yosef looks at them and he says, now, 1 second, are they my Achim or are they Anashim? Because what has happened up until now? Has he been able to get them to demonstrate in any way that they have regret for what they did? No, he doesn't hear that. He's going to hear that in the next parsha. he's going to realize they have total regret in the next parsha. When Vayigash Elov Yehuda, right? When Yehuda comes and speaks on their behalf, and then he realizes that they have real regret for what they did.
What about Ashemim Anachnu?
What?
When they say Aval Ashemim Anachnu,
Yeah.
is that later in the
Yeah,
parsha?
yeah, 100%. The brothers are now only anashim, and they're sent with shluchu because Yosef has this tension. On the one hand, he wants to reunite. On the other hand, he can't reunite unless they demonstrate that they did something terribly wrong and they have charata, they have regret. In these two words, anashim and shluchu, you have the Torah giving a glimpse on how Yosef had a torn relationship with his brothers, which is only logical. The Torah is very realistic. And the Rav says in these two words, you have the realism. Listen, it's only natural that he's going to still feel, well, one second, what kind of brothers are they? Are they willing to reunite with me? Are they willing to take me as a brother or not? And until they demonstrate regret, they can only be anashim, not achim. Okay, then so what does he do? The next morning, he sends his major head of the household to go and catch up with them. But before that, he places in Binyamin's, he creates this whole, hoax, right? And he places his gviyah, his goblet that the Torah tells us he uses for divination, and he places it in Binyamin's sack. Plus, he returns the money once again. So really a bad situation for the brothers. So he takes a look at Pasuk Yud Zayin. What happens here? Pasuk Yud Zayin is fascinating. How do they respond? What do they say, by the way? Let's go before that. What do they say? So they get caught, and they said, no, we didn't steal anything, which they thought they didn't, which clearly they didn't. But what do they say? Whoever is found holding on to whoever sack finds the gviyah is found in, he's going to die. But they said something else. What else do they say? Mm-hmm. They say, and all of us will be slaves with Binyamin. In other words, they're not going to leave Binyamin behind, right? They're not going to do that. They're saying, no, if you find the goblet, the person who you have sacked that you find, definitely he's going to die, but we're all going to become slaves with him. How does Yosef respond to that? Take a look at the last pasuk. This is a very important pasuk for the story. Vayomer, here Yosef is talking to them. Vayomer, cholila lima asos zos. God forbid I will run a judicial system like you just suggested. What was the judicial system that he's not willing to accept?
Collective punishment.
He's collective punishment, exactly. There's no collective punishment. The judicial system of the time could have found all the brothers guilty together with Binyamin for the alleged crime that they were there when the goblet was stolen, right? They could have all been punished because the judicial system would have said, it's not only the person who stole it, you were there with him. He couldn't have done it by himself. You could have easily created that kind of argument in a judicial court, right? In a court of justice. But Yosef insists that only Binyamin, only the person who has the goblet in his sack is the person who committed the crime. The goblet is found in Binyamin's sack. He's the only one that is guilty. Now, understand, Rav Soloveitchik says, what is happening here? Something very important, which foreshadows the next parsha. Because what's going to happen in the next parsha? Vayigash Elov Yehuda. Yehuda's now going to speak up and fight for Binyamin's freedom, correct? He's going to challenge the viceroy of Egypt. How does he do that? And Rav Soloveitchik says, this is the pasuk that explains how Yehuda is able to do what he does in the next week's parsha. When Yehuda saw Yosef and how he reacted, that he was not willing to institute a collective punishment approach, then he realized that Yosef this man in front of him, the viceroy, right, is willing to talk really justice, right? He's not he's not Trump, he's not creating trumped up charges. He's only doing what? He's only fulfilling justice the way it should be. And this is what the Rav says. He's now willing to entertain real, true legal justice. This, the Rav says, emboldens Yehuda to confront Yosef in Parshas Vayigash on behalf of Binyamin. Without this pasuk, you can't understand next week's parsha. How did Yehuda suddenly act the way he acted? He gets emboldened by the fact that he sees Yosef willing to institute true justice, right? He therefore argues in next week's parsha that by making Binyamin a slave and not returning him, by the way, stop a half a second. If you remember next week's whole approach, what does Yehuda say to Yosef?
I'll be your slave instead.
No. He would say, why? Why?
We have an old father.
And what will happen to that old father if Binyamin doesn't come home? Right? He will die. In other words, he was willing to say, Yosef, realize you're a man of justice. You're a man who's willing to do justice. Realize there's going to be a innocent person that's going to be affected by your act. In other words, he's warning him, if you don't return Binyamin, Yaakov would be an unfair victim. And that's what Yehuda is doing. And how does Yehuda have the chutzpah, quote unquote, in quotation marks, the chutzpah to do that? He has the chutzpah to do that only because of this pasuk. When he sees that Yosef is really running a true, honest court, he says, okay, I can approach him. I can argue. Don't allow for an innocent victim to be punished. That's exactly what he says. So continue on. At the very end of the pasuk, Asher nimsa hagavia biyado hu yeh lo eved. This appears to be the cruel hoax that Yosef perpetrated against his brothers, right? The truth was that he did this only so Yaakov would be forced to come down to Egypt now. He didn't get him with Binyamin, right? So now what's he going to do? All the sons, Binyamin is not going home. So now what will that do? Binyamin doesn't come home, Yaakov is going to have to come down. All of this was created. Remember, Yosef left them for a few hours, figuring out how to recalibrate his strategy, because he has only one goal. And what's that one goal? To get Yaakov down, so Yaakov will bow, so he will come Melech. It doesn't happen. We know the end of the story. But that's what Yosef is doing at this juncture. He places the Gviyah in Binyamin's sack, so only one thing will happen, that Yaakov will come down. As soon as that would take place, Yosef's second dream would come to fruition, and Yosef would be declared Melech Yisrael, and the one who is the ancestor of the Moshiach. Yosef is motivated by this one goal, to have Yaakov come down to Egypt and to bow to him. If this would occur, then Yosef becomes Melech, and his whole approach to the world has been vindicated. But we know it's not going to happen. No matter what Yosef is going to do, it's not going to happen. Why not? Because Yehuda has to be Melech. So that's how the Rav understands this whole story. To wrap it up, these psukim at the end of Parshas Miketz, what the Rav understands is through the eyes of Yosef. Yosef has one goal, and that's the only thing that he wants. He wants to get his father down to Egypt. He thought he would come when he insisted Binyamin will come down. He thought he's not going to let, of course Yaakov's going to come, because Yaakov's not going to trust anybody with Binyamin. And when Binyamin comes and he doesn't see Yaakov sitting next to him, oh boy, he has to recalibrate the whole thing.
Is he also concerned that Yaakov might have passed away?
He asks that.
Yeah.
Odenu Chai,
Right.
Odenu Chai, and they tell him, no, Dad is alive. Dad is alive. As much as we know, Dad is alive. We left the man alive, so it's not his health. It's not any problem. So exactly. And so now you understand the whole story. And also the Torah, according to the Rav, gives you an insight also to the torn relationship that Yosef clearly has. He's a human being after all, but that will change as soon as he realizes that his brothers have regret. As soon as they have regret, everything changes and he forgives them, and the whole story changes. But that's how the Rav understands these last two aliyahs in Parshas Miketz as Yosef trying to manipulate the situation for one goal. Yaakov come down, Yaakov bow, the second dream comes to fruition. Yosef gets anointed as king. That's what he wants. It's not going to happen. It's not because it's not in the cards. That's not the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants it. Yosef can't be Melech. Yehuda has to be Melech. Okay, next week I'm out of town, so we won't be studying. I apologize. We won't be studying Vayigash together, but we will do Vayechi Be'ezrat Hashem. Okay, Rabbi Isai, thanks loads.
You left it on a cliffhanger, Rabbi.
Yes, we left it on a cliffhanger. Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi. Have a good day.
You too. Thank
Happy
you.
Hanukkah.
Amen for everyone.
And for your